Welcome back, and hello if you are new. Following the release of their definite wildcard that was their self-titled album Suicide Silence, the band definitely turned some heads. However, now the band are returning with their first effort since that, but is it a return to form? We'll find out as I dissect Become the Hunter. From the word go on Become the Hunter, this returning to their core sound, and by core I don't mean deathcore, I mean the idea of what their sound really used to be, is apparent. And for me, it drew comparisons to the likes of No Time to Bleed, but also The Cleansing, so very early on Suicide Silence material. As the record goes on, there are some elements of experimentation, but understandably so, Suicide Silence are kind of keeping things quite familiar, let's just say, on this album. That also extends to the production team. So they've enlisted Steve Evitts, who was also on You Can't Stop Me and The Black Crown. And they also have Josh Wilbert and Ted Jensen for mastering. So it's very much a kind of familiar territory for the band. Acting very much as a statement of intent, Meltdown definitely sets the precedent for the record and really kind of puts you into this, this is going to be classic Suicide Silence territory. With that in mind, there are some real moments where Become the Hunter becomes a real bruiser, and particularly on In Hiding, it has this real sense of, when Suicide Silence really get going and has that juggernaut sound, and that really comes to the fore on this. Not even me! The album, although nowhere near as pronounced as their self-titled record, definitely does nod its head to a few of the nu metal greats. Death Anxiety, for example, does have that kind of nu metal stomp, but also combines it with Suicide Silence's classic sound. And I think that's a good example of how not necessarily the nu metal idea was wrong, but perhaps it was just done slightly too far, and instead now Become the Hunter is kind of bridging the gap, with Death Anxiety being probably one of the strongest songs on the record. There's also a homage, you could say, to Deftones on Skin Tight, which is very much kind of, I guess, as close as you would get to a ballad from Suicide Silence. Though the problem for me here is that the material that is put forward has kind of been done before. And the reason that kind of is problematic for me is that it ends up being quite predictable. However, this is also understandable because given the huge leap that they took when they were, trying to be as creative as possible, it did somewhat backfire. So this is the album that they kind of needed to play it safe on, so to speak. However, like I did mention, there is a little bit of experimentation, for example on Serene Obscene, which starts with this kind of meditative melody, and then moves into this sort of Middle Eastern style acoustic guitar. Guitar-wise, there are some really cool leads that are implemented on this album, particularly there's a lot of Azagthothian kind of dive bombs, which is evidenced on the actual title track, Become the Hunter itself. But then there's also a well put together solo on the Scythe. The band are experimenting with the use of wah pedal on In Hiding, and particularly on Disaster Valley, they've used kind of effects which are a bit different. It's kind of got that signature Pantera going wee. Vocally, this album does see Hamida try some different techniques, and I think really kind of scale it back into the growling, and there's even at times when the band almost goes to like slam levels of heavy. Following the roller coaster ride that was their self-titled album, Suicide Silence have quite rightly decided to play to their strengths on this record. I do enjoy the fact that the band haven't acted as though the self-titled record just didn't exist, and there are definitely nods to the self-titled record on Become the Hunter. But this is a step in the right direction, if a familiar trod direction, and hopefully it will bring about more positive pastures for the band in the future. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, hit that like and subscribe button. Be sure to check out all my other videos, album reviews, and all sorts of stuff. Leave a comment. I'd be very interested to see what you guys think of this one. And I will see you guys next week for another album review. All right, take care, friends.